On the previous episode of Debunking the Nerd, we have analyzed Castlevania 2, Simon's Quest for the NES, and found out that the game is not that bad as the nerd made it out to be. Today, we'll take a look at Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, arguably the most notorious game featured in the AVGN series. But before we start this episode, we want to make a quick disclaimer. The goal of this series is to analyze the games that are featured in the AVGN series, and to find out if the featured game has any redeemable qualities. We go through the complaints made by the nerd character, and try to find out whether the complaints are sound or not. In other words, we're analyzing the fictional nerd character, and not James Rolfe himself. Alright, let's take a dive into Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde for the NES, and see if it really is a horrible game.
Please do yourself an enormous favor and just stay away from this awful Don't even download it. Like, no matter how curious you are, just do yourself a favor, never play it. I know, the fact that that game exists is a horrible abomination of mankind. That game is so fucking horrible. And I am not kidding. I am dead serious. Dead serious.
Here are the complaints we are going to analyze. Let's start with the useless weapon complaint.
Your only weapon is a cane, but it does nothing. When I first played this, I thought I was doing something wrong. Why would you put a weapon in a game that you can't even use?
Dr. Jekyll has a cane for a weapon. Attacking the villagers only increases the stress meter, and you can't repel any animals with the cane. The only enemies you can defeat with the weapon are the bees. It is safe to say that this is the most useless weapon in the entire library of NES games. Mr. Hyde, on the other hand, has two forms of attack, a simple punch and the psycho wave attack. The punch has a short range of attack, so it's better to use the psycho wave at all times. Having a non-functional weapon in a game certainly does not give any extra appeal to it. It is unclear why the developers made such a useless weapon. Any other NES protagonist has some kind of a weapon or an attack. Even Small Mario has a jump attack to defend himself. Let's take a look at the slow progress complaint.
Why do you walk so slow?
You walk slow as ass, you get knocked backward by everything. Making progress is so slow because every few seconds some guy drops a bomb and you have to start moving away from it. But you either get knocked back into it or it still seems to hit you from a mile away.
Along with the useless weapon, it seems like Dr. Jekyll has useless feet. He moves frustratingly slow. Add some knockbacks along the way, and the slow walking speed gets on your nerves really fast. To emphasize how bad the walking speed is, we have calculated how long it takes to get from the beginning of each level to the end. Introducing Jekyll units. We have measured the distance you need to cover in each stage in Jekyll units. The game runs at 60 frames per second, and the time it takes to travel one Jekyll unit is equal to 27 frames or 0.45 seconds. Stage 1 is 252 Jekylls wide. If you would travel uninterrupted by the enemies, you would take 1 minute and 53 seconds to complete it. Stage 3 has exactly the same layout as Stage 1, so the result is the same for both stages. Stage 2 and 5 have same layouts, with a width of 311 Jekylls. Both stages take 2 minutes and 20 seconds to travel to the end of the stage. Stage 4 is the longest in the game, boasting a width of 508 Jekylls, which amounts to a whopping 3 minutes and 48 seconds. This stage will test your patience, that is, if you haven't already turned the game off in the first couple of minutes. Starting from stage 4, the difficulty of the game ramps up rapidly, as there are way more enemies and hazards to dodge compared to the previous stages. Playing through this stage feels like an eternity, And in our opinion, stage 4 is the worst stage in the entire game. The final, 6th stage, is 344 Jekyll's Wide, or 2 minutes and 34 seconds of interrupted walk to the exit. Depending on which way you're playing this stage, it can be either the worst or the easiest stage in the game. We'll cover this stage in more details in a separate complaint. All these times were calculated with the perfect conditions in mind, which means you just go straight to the exit without stopping. But with enemies constantly knocking you back, and the Hyde and Jekyll transformations, the time needed to complete a stage increases drastically. Depending on the player's skills, it can go up anywhere from 2 to 5 or even more times. Let's pull aside all those nerdy numbers and take a look at complaint number 3, which is the Mad Bomber complaint.
Who's this jackass with the bomb? This is the worst part of the game. If you get hit by the bomb, it takes half your life, and sometimes all of it. The range of these bomb blasts is truly remarkable. You could be a mile away and it still hits you. And each level has about 1,000 of them.
The Mad Bomber complaint is somewhat over-exaggerated. The bomb blasts do not hit you from a mile away. In fact, it's possible to dodge the bomb blasts in every stage, except for the last one. The simplest way to dodge a blast is just walk to the left of the screen whenever you see a bomb. It is also possible to dodge the bomb by going to the right of the screen. In some stages it is done easier than in others, because bombs in each stage have a different detonation time. In the first 2 stages the detonation time is long, so the bombs can be casually walked right through. In stages 3, 4 and 5 the fuse is shorter, but it is possible to dodge the bomb blasts by going to the left of the screen or by going to the right and timing a jump when the fuse appears. Stage 6, however, is a different case. The bombs cannot be dodged, but you can minimize the damage they make by going as far to the left as possible. The nerd mentions the music and graphics very briefly, without going into any details, alongside other complaints.
Awful music, dreadful graphics, unspeakable gameplay, deceptive enemies, unavoidable hazards, useless weaponry, all mixed together and calculated just right. That is a horrible concoction.
There's nothing positive to say about the music and the graphics. The tunes in this game are grating on the ears. You get one song for Dr. Jekyll and one for Mr. Hyde, and they loop over and over again. The music was composed by Michiharu Hasuya, who composed music for lesser-known Famicom and NES titles. It is worth to mention that the title music was lifted from Rygar, for which Hasuya was also the composer. Hasuya has a peculiar style of composing. The man almost never used all 5 available NES sound channels in any of his compositions, often skipping triangle, noise and DPCM sample channels, which are responsible for bass and percussion. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is no exception to this, and that's why the music feels so empty and grates on your ears. The graphics are also lackluster in this game. The washed out blue sky attacks your eyes. Gloomy green-black trees and bushes follow you throughout the whole game. Depressing brown brick buildings and no elaborate backgrounds. When you're playing as Mr. Hyde, you're exposed to slightly better graphics, but poorly done nonetheless. It feels as though you're playing an early NES game, despite the game being released in 1988. Same year as Super Mario Bros. 3 for the Famicom in Japan. Imagine getting Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde instead of Super Mario Bros. 3. Oof. Let's take a look at what the nerd said about the enemies in this game.
And there's a singing lady who hurts you with her musical notes.
The singing lady is also programmed in the most heartless and inhumane way. If you have enough coins, you can pay her off. But regardless, she's hard to even get near. Her musical notes keep knocking you back. And those spiders, you'd think you could just watch the pattern and go under. But they don't have a pattern. It feels as if they're programmed to hit you automatically. The most unassuming townspeople just charge through you.
What did the good doctor do to make everybody so upset?
In addition to the Mad Bomber, the nerd singles out spiders and the singing lady as problematic enemies. All enemies in this game are programmed to have random attack patterns, so it's difficult to predict their next move. The spiders are annoying. It is possible to go underneath them, but it requires some luck. To do this, you have to get close to a spider and move as soon as it goes above Jekyll, and hope it doesn't go down again. Townsfolk aren't a problem until the 4th stage, where there are lots of them constantly rushing at you. The singing lady is the most annoying enemy in the game. She gives hard to dodge patterns most of the time, and going past her can certainly be frustrating. You can pay her off with coins, which you collect as Mr. Hyde, but good luck dodging all the notes. There are other enemies in the game, such as gravediggers, hunters, birds, cats and dogs. These are easier to dodge, with dogs being the only enemy with a predictable pattern. Most of the enemies aren't an issue in this game. The problem begins when you face all these enemies together. It gets difficult to dodge a spider or a bomber while you're being attacked by other enemies all at once. Add the previously mentioned difficulty spike of stage 4 and the random attack patterns, and the enemies get hard to deal with pretty fast. The enemies in Hyde mode are angels in comparison. Most of them can be easily killed with the Psycho Wave. There are a couple of annoying enemies, such as this floating head and the spiked ball thingy, but with a little practice you can get used to dealing with them. Considering that most of the time is spent playing this game is in Jekyll mode, the randomness and the frequency of the enemies gets old really fast. We understand why the nerd is frustrated with the enemies in this game. Let's take a look at the lightning strike complaint.
And then look, then you die, and then you turn into Mr. Hyde, I guess. Walk around punching people and throwing shit. And then for no reason you just die. Lightning will strike like real spontaneous, then you're dead. And then the game's over. What the f*** is that shit?
The lightning strike is arguably the most notorious part of the game. Taking hits from townsfolk and all the wild animals fills up the Hyde meter and transforms the player into Mr. Hyde once it is full. As Hyde, you are thrown into a reversed world and need to kill enemies to fill up the Jekyll meter. Once filled, you will reverse back to Dr. Jekyll. But if you don't fill up the meter before you reach the spot where you transformed into Hyde, lightning will strike and kill Hyde, resulting in a game over. So basically, the farther you get with Dr. Jekyll, the more time you have as Mr. Hyde to transform back. In the last stage, this transformation works a bit different, but we'll cover that a bit later. The next complaint is sliding off the wall kills Hyde.
If you randomly slip off a wall, you'll also die. And that's ultra bullshit.
The way this complaint was presented is very misleading. Jumping or sliding off the wall doesn't kill Mr. Hyde. What really happened here is just a simple bug. We were able to recreate it in stage 4 and only in the same spot as the nerd. You can jump to your heart's content 99% of the time without any fear. Let's tackle the big bad final level complaint.
The 6th and final level is the pure definition of hell. This is f***ing insane. There's these rolling barrels that keep on coming. Sometimes you can't even jump over them because you'll get hit by the next one. If the barrels weren't enough, you also have the Mad Bomber to deal with. The Mad Bomber respawns infinitely, which is one of the worst offenses in retro gaming. As soon as he exits on the left, he immediately reappears on the right in a never-ending loop. You take one step forward and then 10 steps back. How is anybody supposed to get through this?
As we have mentioned earlier, the final stage is either the easiest or the hardest stage in the game, depending on how you play it. There's a normal and a true ending in this game. If you're going for the normal ending, it is definitely the worst stage in the game. The non-stop onslaught of mad bombers and barrels will make you regret ever playing this game. The key to beating this stage is to fill up the Hyde meter, taking as little damage as possible. Transform into Hyde, fill up the Jekyll meter, then transform back into Jekyll, and repeat the process all over again, slowly progressing forward. This stage is very frustrating and boring at the same time. One small mistake and you'll get a game over, erasing all the progress you made in this stage. At least the developers had the courtesy to give infinite continues, so you can continue from the last stage you played. Then there's the true ending. Getting it is way easier than getting the normal ending. The trick here is to transform into Hyde and go all the way up to the church to fight the final boss. The last stage differs from the Jekyll's last stage. There's a rooftop section that you have to navigate, and for some reason the lightning won't strike you. The only explanation on why the lightning won't strike Mr. Hyde, although he is at a higher elevation, is that the mass of his big cojones erases all the protons in the ground below him. Thus, the electrons from the bottom of the cloud don't have anywhere to go. Anyway, good luck figuring out that this stage is the last one, and that it needs to be played in a completely different manner to the previous stages. You were conditioned previously not to go too far with Hyde, so why would you start exploring right now all of a sudden? After defeating the only boss in the game, you are turned back into Jekyll. Now all the townspeople and animals are gone, and you can go uninterrupted to the church and finish the game. This concludes our analysis of the nerd's complaints. Is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde for the NES is as bad as the nerd says? In our opinion, yes. The game has an interesting and unique mechanic of the reverse worlds. However, the overall poor execution is what makes this game bad. Thank you for watching until the end, and see you in the next one.